Hi, it's Wednesday, August 14th. I finally have time to record another update after being unable to for the last couple of days, for which I apologize. But this is Ernesto, just freshly designated a hurricane by the National Hurricane Center as it begins to pull away from Puerto Rico. The storm moved just near the northeastern part of the island and through the Virgin Islands last night, and it's been bringing very heavy rains in these spiral bands to the islands, up to 10 inches of rain in spots and still falling, especially over Puerto Rico as of this hour. So, flash flooding a concern, flash flood warnings present over most of this region. And so, we hope everyone is staying safe today. As the system moves northwest now, it continues to organize only at a gradual pace, nothing rapid here. There is some northwesterly shear impinging on the vortex. You can see a lack of banding on the northwest side. There's an outflow boundary or two indicating collapsing thunderstorm updrafts, showing some of that dry air being pushed in by the shear. And we don't see any kind of eye yet. We do see curved banding of the thunderstorm activity near the center of the circulation, but no eye dimple yet. This is the aircraft reconnaissance mission into Ernesto right now, showing a pressure of 993 millibars, not particularly low. And the hurricane force winds estimated by the National Hurricane Center were found kind of in this band on the eastern side of strong wind. You'll see the reds and purples kind of confined there. That's at quite a distance from the center of circulation, which is over here. And the storm, although it is a hurricane, is not that well organized yet, as these strong winds have not really wrapped around in any significant fashion to the north and west of the storm center. We would expect the winds on the west side to be a little bit weaker as the storm is moving towards the northwest, but they are quite weak at the moment, with some of these readings well under tropical storm force on that side. So that's a sign that this is not yet really organized. We don't have a core of small radius maximum wind close to the center. It's all distant from the center, and that will need to change if Ernesto is to become a more fearsome hurricane over the next couple of days. Looking at the upper level winds from the GFS, we'll see the source of that shear. There's a little bit of an upper level trough to the west of the storm. Ernesto's right there. Just a little bit of westerly flow kind of hitting on the storm, and since the low level flow is out of the south, this ends up being a northwesterly shear in the net. And so that explains kind of the ceiling that's being put on Ernesto at the moment, keeping it from rapidly intensifying. This could change a little bit over the next day or two as this trough will start to weaken and pull away. You'll see that by the time we get to Thursday morning or so, this trough is more distant from the hurricane, and the hurricane is now moving kind of to its northeast. And at this point, shear may relax. The models disagree a little bit. The European model shows less shear than the GFS, but conditions on Thursday may be more favorable than today on Wednesday. And so we would expect to see Ernesto continue intensifying and perhaps get more organized than it is today. And then what comes next is this big trough over the northwestern Atlantic. This is what is ushering the storm towards the north and eventually the north-northeast. Bermuda is right here, and so of course the concern now is for a potential impact to that island. This trough is going to function two different ways. One of them is favorable to the storm. As the storm moves towards Bermuda, we'll see that the outflow into this jet streak on the southeastern flank of the trough, that's this zone of red and purple showing very fast wind speeds accelerating away from the hurricane toward the northeast. This promotes tremendous upper level divergence and really amplifies the thunderstorm activity within the hurricane as it approaches that jet streak. And that is a positive impact for the storm in the sense that it favors intensification. However, as the storm nears the base of this trough, there is going to be northwesterly or westerly wind at its base that undercuts the outflow of the hurricane and creates some extra shear. And it may not look that high from this particular image, but when you look at the actual sounding from the GFS averaged across the vortex at that same time, you'll see that there's actually a whole lot of shear, maximum values almost 40 knots, and the conventional metric about 26 knots out of the northwest. And that's because in the lower levels of the profile here, we have southerly wind, these southerly oriented wind barbs, but up near 300 millibars where that trough is, you have 20 knot northwesterlies in those mid levels. And so that's a pretty powerful amount of shear. All models agree on that. And so the tension between that unfavorable impact and the favorable impact of the trough will govern Ernesto's intensity. One other wrinkle here is that if we look at the steering, as this trough picks up the storm, there's Ernesto on Thursday morning moving into the trough. This trough is going to eventually pull out. So before Ernesto actually makes it to Bermuda, this trough weakens, shrinks, moves to the northeast, and briefly leaves the hurricane behind. You can see there's a ridge coming in behind it. So steering currents actually weaken a little bit, and the storm may actually slow down for a day or two right as it's nearing the island of Bermuda right there. That could matter because of the impact of the ocean. Once you're up into the subtropical latitudes like this, the warm water isn't quite as deep as it is down in the deep tropics in the Caribbean. So as we look at the coupled halves A model from NOAA, this is where the hurricane is on Thursday morning, and it's all warm water. Bermuda's right here, so it's all about 28, 29 degrees Celsius as the storm moves toward the island. But if it slows down, and especially if it's a stronger and larger hurricane, you'll see that eventually we get this cooling and these yellow colors start to appear as the storm is moving a little slower, it's a little stronger, and this water cools rather quickly because it's shallow. And if the storm slows down enough, this cooling could be enough to put a ceiling on the storm's intensity, could be another negative factor that keeps Ernesto relatively in check. That said, though, conditions here seem to favor a stronger hurricane than we have today on its way toward Bermuda, and this could fairly easily be a Category 2 or 3 hurricane, winds of 100 to 115 miles per hour. Many models have it in about that range at its peak, and that is indeed what the National Hurricane Center has in their forecast as well. As far as the track goes, it's been pretty good agreement in the modeling. This is the track guidance from this morning. Bermuda is very hard to see on this map, but it's right here. I can circle it for you. And so we do have models to the west, models to the east. Again, it's a small target, but models have really been locked on this area for some time now, and we're about 3 days out from the point of closest approach to Bermuda. And it's worth noting that the storm will probably grow in size as it's moving to the northeast into the subtropical latitudes. And so even if it moves to the west or the east of the island, at this point the odds of the wind field impacting Bermuda are relatively high. And if we look at the official forecast, we see that they are very close to the island as well. They happen to be on the western side of the island, but again, this forecast could move around. There's always a little bit of uncertainty here, but Saturday morning is when closest point of approach is expected, and you can see that they have the letter M here on Friday morning, indicating a Category 3 hurricane, and then slight weakening as the storm approaches the island, perhaps due to the cooling water that I mentioned earlier. You can see that the wind field right now in orange, tropical storm force or stronger, will only get larger over time during this journey, and so it's rather easy for Bermuda to receive impacts from the storm one way or the other. It's just a question of how severe, given how close the storm will pass to the island and how strong the eye wall will be at the time the hurricane arrives. But be prepared for a hurricane hit here. Bermuda not unaccustomed to this, and the infrastructure typically pretty resilient, but do have a plan just in case here. And then beyond Bermuda, we could see a fairly close brush potentially with southeastern Canada. A little bit far out yet to have any confidence on that, as it could easily turn toward the east, south of Canada, but worth keeping an eye on up here as we look at that upper level pattern with this trough pulling out, a little bit of ridging behind. It may take a second for the next trough over the Great Lakes to pick up the hurricane, and so there might be an opportunity for impacts. We'll keep an eye on that as we head into the early part of next week. That's about it for this video. We'll continue to track Ernesto with strengthening expected before it impacts Bermuda sometime this weekend. Be safe, everyone. That's it for now. Thanks for watching.